Snow had been falling over the village of Ashvale for 3 days without stopping. The rooftops sagged under white blankets, the roads had vanished beneath drifts, and the forest that bordered the village had turned into a silent, frozen world. Most people stayed indoors, huddled near their fires, waiting for the storm to pass. But Alira Voss was not most people. She was 22 years old, the daughter of the village's late herbalist, and since her father's death, 2 winters ago, she had taken on his work. She walked into the woods almost every day, storm or shine, searching for roots, bark, and frozen berries that could still be used for medicine. The villagers thought she was reckless. Her neighbors warned her about wolves, about the old stories of creatures that lived deep in the northern trees, creatures that were said to be more than animals. Alira never paid much attention to those warnings. She had grown up poor, and the woods had always fed her family when nothing else could. That morning, she wrapped herself in her thickest wool cloak, tied her boots tight, and stepped out into the cold with a woven basket over her arm. The wind bit at her cheeks, but she pressed forward, following the frozen creek that cut through the pines. She needed more yarrow root before the fever sickness spreading through the village grew worse. Old Mabel's children were already coughing blood, and Alira had promised she would not let another family bury a child this winter. She had walked nearly 2 miles when she heard it. A faint, broken whimper, almost lost beneath the howling wind. She stopped and listened. There it was again, weaker this time. She followed the sound past a fallen tree, through a thicket of frozen bramble, until she came to a small clearing near the creek. There, half buried in a snowdrift, lay a wolf cub. Its fur, which should have been pure white, was matted with ice and frost. Its small chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. One of its front legs was twisted at an odd angle, and its lips had turned a pale shade of blue. Alira's heart clenched. She knew the stories. She knew that wolves in this forest were not ordinary animals, that some claimed to have seen men become beasts beneath the full moon, and beasts become men again by morning. She knew, too, that most people in her village would have turned and walked away, afraid of what touching a wolf might bring upon them. But she did not see a monster. She saw a dying creature, alone in the snow, no different in its suffering than any other living thing. She knelt beside it without hesitation, pulling off her mittens with her teeth so she could feel its fur. It was freezing, far too cold. She unwrapped her own cloak, wincing as the icy wind hit her body, and wound the thick wool around the cub instead. She lifted it gently, cradling it against her chest, and began the long walk home, half running through the snow with the small, shivering body pressed close to her heart. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that she was being watched. From the shadow of the pines at the edge of the clearing stood a tall figure, still as stone, his eyes the color of storm clouds fixed on the girl and the cub in her arms. His name was Cale Draven, and though few humans had ever seen his face, every creature in the northern forest knew his name. He was the Alpha King of the Silver Fang Pack, ruler of the wolf clans that lived beyond the tree line, a man of immense strength and quiet, controlled fury. He had not slept in 3 days. He had been tracking a scent through the storm, moving faster than any human eye could follow, driven by something close to panic, though he would never have called it that. The cub in Alira's arms was his youngest brother, Rowan. Only 10 years old in human years, Rowan had been cursed 3 nights ago by a rival pack seeking to weaken Cale's rule. The curse had trapped him in wolf form, stripped of his ability to shift back, and bound him to the cold in a way that no ordinary wolf pelt could protect him from. Cale had searched every frozen mile of the forest, terror clawing at his chest with every hour that passed, certain he would find his brother's small body lifeless in the snow. Instead, he found a human woman kneeling beside him, giving up her own cloak, carrying him through a blizzard toward warmth. Cale's first instinct was to step forward, to take his brother back with his bare hands, and warn the girl never to speak of what she had seen. That was what a king was supposed to do: take, protect, control. But something about the way she moved, the fierce gentleness in her hands, the way she murmured soft, useless comforting words to a creature that could not understand her, made him stop. He followed at a distance instead, silent among the trees, his golden eyes never leaving them. Alira reached her cottage just as the storm began to worsen, snow turning sideways in the wind. She kicked the door shut behind her, and laid the cub down on the thick rug in front of her hearth, quickly building the fire higher than she normally allowed herself, using wood she had been saving for the coldest nights of the season. She fetched warm water and clean cloths, gently wiping the ice from the cub's fur, checking its twisted leg with careful, practiced fingers. It's broken, she thought grimly, but not shattered. It can heal. She splinted the small leg with 2 thin sticks and a strip of cloth, murmuring apologies as the cub whimpered in pain. She warmed a small amount of broth on the fire, and when the cub was too weak to eat, dipped her fingers in it and let it lick the warmth from her skin, drop by drop. Hours passed. The storm outside grew louder, rattling the windows, but inside the small cottage, there was only the crackle of the fire and Alira's soft voice, telling the cub that it was safe now, that she would not let it die, that whatever it was, wolf or something else entirely, it deserved to live through this cold. She did not sleep. She sat beside it through the night, pressing warm cloths against its trembling body, watching its chest rise and fall, until, sometime near dawn, its breathing finally steadied into something calmer, something stronger. Outside, in the shadow of a great oak near her window, Kale had not moved for hours. He watched the glow of her fire flicker against the frosted glass. He watched her silhouette bent over his brother's small body, hour after hour, refusing to rest. He had ruled his pack for 6 years. He had seen loyalty bought with fear, respect earned through strength, and obedience demanded through power. He had never once seen kindness offered with nothing expected in return. It unsettled him. It also, though he would never have admitted it easily, moved something in his chest that had been cold and closed for a very long time. When morning finally broke, and the storm quieted to a gentle snowfall, exhaustion finally overtook Alira. She fell asleep sitting upright beside the hearth, one hand still resting on the cub's fur. It was then that Kale allowed himself to step inside. He shifted silently in the small space behind her cottage, pulling on the plain traveling clothes he kept for such rare occasions, and entered through the unlocked door without a sound. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and sharp, watchful eyes that missed nothing. He crossed the room in a few quiet steps and knelt beside his sleeping brother, checking the splint on his leg, the warmth of his small body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Rowan would live. He was certain of it now. He turned his gaze to the sleeping woman beside the wolf cub, her dark hair falling loose over her shoulder, her hands still faintly stained from tending the fire and the wounds. She had given up her own cloak, her own firewood, her own rest, for a creature that was not even truly a wolf, without asking for anything, without even knowing what she had saved. He did not wake her. He did not know, in that moment, what he would even say if he did. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his coat and withdrew a small silver pendant, shaped like a wolf's head, an old token of his family line, passed down through generations of his pack, as a mark of protection. He set it gently on the table beside her, where she would find it when she woke. Then, lifting his brother with careful hands, he turned and walked back out into the snow, leaving no sound behind him, only the soft press of footprints that the falling snow would erase within the hour. When Alira woke, the cub was gone. For a moment, panic gripped her chest. Had it wandered off, hurt, into the cold again? But then her eyes fell upon the small silver pendant resting on her table, gleaming faintly in the morning light. She picked it up, turning it over in her fingers, studying the fine craftsmanship, the delicate lines carved into the wolf's face. It was far too fine a thing for any ordinary traveler to have left behind by accident. She walked to her door and opened it, stepping out into the snow. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside hushed and white. She saw faint tracks leading from her window toward the tree line. The tracks of bare human feet, oddly enough, walking beside the smaller paw prints of a wolf, but they faded before she could follow them far, swallowed by fresh snowfall. She stood there for a long while, the pendant warm in her closed hand, wondering who could have come and gone so silently in the night, wondering if she had imagined the whole strange, wonderful thing. But the ache in her arms from carrying the cub, the burn marks on her fingers from tending the fire all night, told her it had been real. She did not know, standing there in the quiet morning light, that she had just saved the blood of a king, She did not know that somewhere beyond the trees, in a stone hall warmed by roaring fires, a young boy had opened his eyes as a boy again, weak but alive, asking his brother, in a small voice, who the kind woman with the warm hands had been. She did not know that the Alpha King, a man feared across the northern territories, had knelt in her small cottage and made a silent vow to himself that her kindness would not go unanswered. She only knew that something had changed. The forest, which had always felt vast and indifferent to her, now felt watched, in a way that did not frighten her but instead left her with a strange, quiet comfort, as though something out there had taken notice of her and approved. In the weeks that followed, small, unexplained kindnesses began appearing at her doorstep. A bundle of firewood, far more than she could have gathered alone, stacked neatly by her door on the coldest mornings. Fresh game left just beyond her garden fence when her stores ran low. Once, after a fever swept through the village and left her own small stock of medicine depleted, she woke to find rare healing herbs, ones that did not grow anywhere near Ashvale, wrapped carefully in cloth on her windowsill. She never saw who left them, but she began to feel, more and more, that she was not as alone in the world as she had once believed. Alira did not know that Cale returned to the edge of the forest almost every evening after that night, standing in the shadow of the same great oak, watching the light in her window, listening for the sound of her voice, though she could never see him there. She did not know that his brother Rowan, now healed and whole, spoke of her often, calling her the woman with warm hands who had saved him from the cold. She did not know that the Alpha King, a man who had never bowed to anyone, found himself thinking of a village healer with tired eyes and a fierce, unshakable kindness, wondering how a woman he had barely spoken to could unsettle a heart he had thought long closed to such things. Winter eventually loosened its grip on Ashvale. The snow melted into soft mud, and the frozen creek began to run again, clear and cold beneath the pale spring sun. Alira continued her work, tending the sick, gathering herbs, never quite forgetting the small white cub she had carried home through the storm, or the silver pendant she now wore always around her neck, a quiet reminder of a night she still could not fully explain. She would not learn the truth of what she had done for many months yet. She would not know, not for a long while, that the shadows at the edge of the forest held a king who watched over her with quiet devotion, waiting patiently for the right moment to finally step out of the darkness and into the light of her small, warm home. But that moment, though she did not know it yet, was coming. And when it did, nothing in Alira Voss's quiet life would ever be the same again.